So we're going to move on to session 1 and panel 1 for today. And the topic will be overview of policy and regulatory challenges, which is a catalyst for growth, investment, and employment. As a lead speaker, we have with us Ozim Ifeoma Obasi, Executive General Counsel, GE, Gas Power in Sub-Saharan Africa, GE. So we have also as a moderator, Oyeyemi Oke, partner AO2 Law. As panelists, we will have Temilolu Sheon Ashamu, Honorable Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources, Oyo State Government. Anita Otubo, Head Program Management Unit, Nigeria Electrification Project. Donald Ibebuike, Managing Partner and Head Oil, Gas and Energy Practice Group, Foundation Chambers. Dolapo Kukoyi, Partner, Detail Commercial Solicitors. So I'll pass this on to the moderator, Oyeyemi Oke, if you would like to say just a few words about yourself, and please, Oyeyemi, pass on to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to moderate this session. Without further ado, I would want us to dive in quickly. The topic for this session has to do with policy and regulatory challenges and how we can use some of these policies and regulations which we have as a catalyst for growth and investment within the renewable energy space. I have a very well qualified panel that would speak on the various issues. But before we hear members of the panel individually, it would be good to listen to the presentation of the lead speaker at this time. So Ozim, I would hand over to you to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Once again, apologies for that, hiccup. So my name is Ozim Ifeoma Obasi. I'm the Executive General Counsel for GE Gas Power. I'm based out of Accra. I'm Nigerian, and I'm happy to be here with you. Like we mentioned earlier, the topic of the session has been shared already, and so today we're going to look at the overview of policy and regulatory challenges. So for those who joined yesterday, a lot was said yesterday actually, and today about renewables. And I don't think anyone on this session is arguing about the benefits or otherwise of renewable energy. So from an overview of the regulatory space perspective, what I want to focus on is for us to analyze the current state of play in terms of where we are with the energy sector, fossil fuel option versus the renewables. Now, this is not to make a case for fossil or otherwise. However, what I want us to look at is Nigeria as a case study, the energy options available to us, what we've been able to do in the space that we are currently operating in, and look at that, bear that in mind as we push renewables and also understand the opportunities available in the renewable space and what we can do better as we move towards that as well. So I'm not going to, of course, focus on coal, the energy sources, the coal, petroleum, etc., or the gas-fired generators. Yes, I work for GE as well. Though we know that with improved technology, the main concern around renewables had always been clean energy. We know that with improved technology, we can manage all the carbon emissions. However, for today, we're going to focus on regulatory challenges around our renewable energy use. And of course, the past speakers have also shared the success stories from different perspectives and different countries as well. But for the purpose of our discourse today, permit me to restrict that to Nigeria. And those are things we can also extrapolate and apply to other countries as well. for the purpose of our discourse, what I want us to look at is using Nigeria as a case study and also reviewing the cost-benefit analysis of renewable energy for us make a call where exactly we want to land with it. As of today, we're still heavy on gas-fired generators and the fossil fuels. Of course, with the discuss towards shift to renewable energy, I want us to have at the back of our mind the opportunities, the challenges we've faced with fossil, and also have some lessons learned from a regulatory perspective and see what we can transmit to the renewable energy sector. Because what we don't want to happen is the hiccups we've had in the current energy space to take that into the renewables system as well as we push for that. So from a background perspective, of course, we know what, when we talk of renewable, we're talking about solar, hydro, wind, hydrogen, etc. Right? Now, when the question will always be, there's sun. We live in a region where, I mean, the sun is in abundance. And from a layman's perspective, whenever they take light, my question is, I just say, why can't we just use solar? And I've personally tried to explore the option of solar energy at home. And to be honest, when you hear of the initial cost, you go like, oh, I'm better off with my diesel. But of course, when we look at the long-term advantage, we will all agree that, yes, renewable option is definitely the way to go. But the key question is the immediate sunk cost. How can government get more involved in renewable space? One, to make it attractive for investors, and two, to make it affordable and available, right, for the people that would generally benefit from them, right? Now, so for today, what we want to also achieve is we have a renewable framework in Nigeria, right, which hasn't really gone far. And of course, we're also going to focus a lot on the national energy policy, particularly chapter 5, that dwells on renewable energy. Now, what would say, or one would ask, the wind is there, hydro is there, solar is there. What then stops us from maximizing these natural sources of energy that the sun will always be there, right? So what then happens? And for those that joined earlier, for some of the speakers were from countries that don't even have as much sunlight as we do in Africa. So from an investment perspective, my question would then be, how do they get it right and we that have it in abundance don't? Then we have to deal with issues such as storage, etc. So just looking at chapter 5 of the National Energy Policy, for instance, the sources, like we say, are there. Then the question is then, we know the advantages of the renewable energy. We want to shift to that space. But today, can we afford a total shift to renewable energy? Of course, the answer is no. One, in terms of the technology and the cost. Now, can we also talk about the need for energy mix? Yes. Which could also provide that energy security we need in our country and also in Africa. Now, how do we augment what we have presently if the gas or the fossil fuels availability or the usage is not meeting our energy demand? How do we then bring renewables into the mix and make it attractive for investors, make it affordable for the consumers, so that at every given point in time, we will be able to satisfy the demand that is ever increasing, particularly in a place like Nigeria with a high population. So personally, I think there's a high need for that energy mix. So we then need to think of the right regulatory framework to shift from a nice to have to something that we would all want to invest in and will create the enabling environment to make that happen. Like I was discussing with Yemi earlier, the events in Nigeria in the past 2 weeks have further affected even investors in this sector, right? And like the sun in Nigeria is also the sun in Kenya. So if someone is going to have safety or political stability in country A, why move to country B? So we also have a lot to do as different countries to make sure that from a political perspective, economic perspective, social perspective, we have the right things in place to attract the right investors that will yield the returns, because this is definitely not going to be a charity venture. And for it to create the opportunities, right? We saw the presentation from the Solicitors, the opportunities is as created even at the rural level. These are what we want to be able to achieve in this sort of energy space, okay? The opportunity for job creation, of course, cannot be overemphasized. And of course, there's demand. So it's not an investment that does not have guaranteed returns. It definitely does. So what we need to overcome from a national or investment perspective is that initial cost of investment, which further down we're going to see how the government and us can create the right environment to attract the right capital towards it. So in terms of opportunities for growth, again, they are bound. Hydropower, we have that. Have we tapped it? No. So no aspect of renewables has been maximized to meet the demand. And the question for us is why? It boils down to regulatory framework. It boils down to the right investment opportunity. It boils down to the right access to capital and attracting the right investors, and also improvement in technology. So since the key thing is it's available, there's market for it, there's demand, then let's make it happen. That is where the regulatory framework comes in, and that is also where the getting a public-private partnership into it, because it's not just enough to say, okay, there it is, go invest. You and I may want to invest, but can we afford to? So there will still be at the initial stage for a place like Africa and Nigeria for government involvement to create the right environmental framework and the right investment framework for that to happen. Now, I know we're also pressed for time, especially with the hiccups. So I want to focus on what options do we have for the future. Bearing in mind, we are all aligned in terms of the need for the energy mix, the need for exploring renewables for obvious reasons. It's a cleaner source of energy and it's available. So the only challenge it has had is in terms of investment and the cost. Now, what can we do to make it happen? Besides just passing, even if you pass the laws, it is there, but then what gives it effect? How do we translate it from paper to action? First, we need to make sure that there's access to capital, right? Presently, it's still expensive for us to have solar versus just going to get petrol for your generator or diesel. So how can we make this competitive? Therefore, we need government's consistent support. It's very much needed. Short-term, mid-term, just like it's been done in the National Energy Policy. So we need to create that investment climate, have short, mid, long-term objectives, and put funds or create access to capital to attract interested investors. And also we can start with even the rural electrification project, even for the schools, markets, agricultural settlement, like we saw earlier of the IDP camps, etc. And making access to long-term financing lower digits. I don't know if you've tried borrowing funds for business in this part of the world. You find yourself being exposed to double digits lending. That cannot afford to happen in a renewable space. Then we even consider things like tax holidays for investors, and easy access to land and permits. Now, for you to put solar panels, you need much more land space than if somebody is just putting a turbine in one place or trying to provide an alternative source of energy. So with all these things in mind, or the obvious challenges to renewables, it will take more than individual will to make it happen. We definitely need government collaboration, to make that happen. And for, of course, local capacity development, we also need to minimize importing everything. So we also need to think of how do we develop capacity locally and make sure that we have credible alternatives, right? Just like has been done in the oil sector, the local content law being passed, we also need to think of it in this respect as well. How do we localize this technology so that it will help reduce the cost of the renewable energy option and tangibly track progress? Like we say, we have loads of laws in this country. It's implementation. So we need to set up an agency like the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure. How are they progressing? What are the time frames for developing tangible milestones for that will feed into the renewable energy sector? And even the Solicitors Energy Research Center that commenced production of solar panels in the country. How, deliberately tracking progress and see if this will serve as a credible alternative to imported solar panels and thereby further increasing interest and also investment in this area. So I guess.
Thank you.
So thanks. I know we kind of pressed for time. I'm just going to pause here and also hand over to you for.
Yes. Thank you so much. That was Ozimi Fiomobase, Executive General Counsel, GE. I'm sure there'll be many more. Please don't leave right after your sessions. Let's see if we can engage and have further conversations with one another. I'm sure there are questions from people in the audience and so on. Donald Ibebuike, Managing Partner and Head Oil and Gas Energy Practice Group. I'll pass on to you, Donald.
My name is Donald Ibebuike. I'm the Managing Partner of Foundation Chambers. My main areas of practice are oil and gas, energy, and maritime. I was called to the Nigerian Bar in 2005. Ever since, I have worked with Foundation Chambers until 2009 when I traveled to UK for my master's. I did master's in 2010 in oil and gas law at the University of Aberdeen. After my master's program, I had a brief work at Clyde & Co. LLP London office, after which I returned back to Nigeria and continued my work at Foundation Chambers. I've been with the firm, rising through the ranks until I became the managing partner of the firm.
Thank you so much, okay. Thank you for that. We'll come back to you during the panel conversation. We will go to the next, Dolapo Kukoyi, Partner Detail Commercial Solicitors. May I pass on to you just a few words about yourself before we go into the panel conversation? Dolapo, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. As been introduced, my name is Dolapo Kukoyi. I'm a partner with Detail Commercial Solicitors, and we are a firm of transaction lawyers. Our focus is on corporate commercial law in areas including energy being power and oil and gas. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Dolapo.
And happy to be here in very difficult circumstances in Nigeria right now, but still happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for still making the time despite the situation. We're all very saddened by this, and we do sympathize with the situation. Thank you. So Anita Otubu, Head Program Management Unit, Nigeria Electrification Project. Anita, I'll pass on to you for a few words on yourself, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anita Otubu. I am currently the head of the Program Management Unit for the Nigeria Electrification Project, which is essentially a portfolio of programs under the Rural Electrification Agency, and it's funded by loan facilities provided by the World Bank and the African Development Bank for the total amount of $550 million US. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. I pass on to the moderator, Oyeyemi Oke. We will start the panel conversations, and then maybe Ozim would like to conclude later on. Please, Oyeyemi, take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. I think we'll just jump into the discourse for today, and I would start with Donald.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I have to also thank the lead speaker for making our job easier. Looking at the question, it's not something one can say, yes, we have sufficient laws or legal framework to for sustainable renewable energy in sources of power in Nigeria. I doubt that we have sufficient, but I think we have the basic legal framework to attract the necessary investments. Even though renewable energy sources, we can say that we have a comprehensive legal framework, addressing issues specifically relating to the renewable energy. But we have several laws which we can combine together to say that we have a sufficient legal framework to attract the required investments. The major law in this regard is the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, which repealed the existing law, under which the Nigeria National Electric Power Authority, was the sole government institution that provide for generation, distribution, as well as transmission of power in Nigeria. But that monopoly was a sort of liberalized when the Electric Power Sector Reform Act came into effect in 2005, which led to the unbundling of the distribution and generation sectors. The advantage of that act is it now encourages and also gives the private sector the power to come and invest, or the right to come and invest in the energy sector. That's why up to now, that's why we are here, trying to say what can be done to further encourage the private sector to invest. When we look at that, you will also consider some other related laws like the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission Act, of 2005 also, which has the objective of encouraging public-private sector participation in infrastructure provision, and this also includes investment in renewable energy. So putting all these things together, and also having regard to the Energy Commission of Nigeria Act, which has the mandate to coordinate development of energy sources of energy in Nigeria, including also renewable energy. When you bring all these kindred laws together, you see that even though renewable energy was not the major target, but their powers, the space of the operation cover renewable energy, and based on their targets, the Nigerian government has come up with some regulations, and guidelines, like the guidelines on renewable energy policy of 2006, also the National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, policy of 2015. All these laws, all these regulations, government brought them up in order to deepen the possibility of generating more power from renewable energy sources. Now, even though all these are here, but the problem is we have a challenge of implementation, and I think that challenge arises as a result of the law being in soft laws, like in regulatory forms, regulations, instead of an act of the National Assembly. So there's no the need, that obligation on the part of government to ensure full implementation, is not there. So in order to make it robust, in order to encourage investment in that sector, there's the need for government to, follow what is obtainable elsewhere, like in Italy, where they have the ministerial decree of 2014, which is tailored towards biotin renewable source of energy, and that law itself creates its regulatory framework, as well as incentives for any investor that wants to invest in that aspect of renewable energy. But in Nigeria, we don't have any such, localized regulatory framework that attaches to a particular source of renewable energy. Then the similar approach was taken by Norway in their offshore renewable energy, development act. That is also another example where that aspect is for offshore wind energy development. So I think for Nigeria to grow beyond what we have now, there is the need for a legal framework, an act of the National Assembly, specifically addressing issues, on each aspect of renewable energy. Having a suite of incentive, guiding each and every one of the aspects. And this way, open up the sector and place the needed certainty, for investors to see, look, instead of trying to look for different regulations, different policies, as looking for, can we rely on this to do investment or to do this or do that? No. But if you have a streamlined legal framework in the nature of an act of the National Assembly, that will facilitate easy investment, and that will also encourage that access to development of access to electrification. So beside this,
Donald, I would need to come in there because of time. I understand from the organizers that we are pressed for time significantly, and I would want equal opportunity for members of the panel to contribute. So I would move to Anita. My apologies for that, Donald. But I'll move to Anita. Donald touched on a point, which is implementation. Sometimes I think, there's a saying that African countries actually have the best laws, but they actually always sit on shelves. So, looking from your experience, what are the practical challenges faced with regards to policy and regulatory implementation?
Thank you very much.
Permit me to say that you would have just about 3 minutes to answer the question. For being harsh on time, but understand that we really have so little time left.
No problem. I'll try my best to keep my answers short as possible. So I guess when we're usually asked what are the challenges faced by the power sector, essentially the first answer is usually that we have issues with regards to access to finance. And then the second answer is that we have regulatory uncertainty. However, in Nigeria, and I'm not just saying this because I work with the federal government of Nigeria, I believe that we have a very robust legal framework that allows for private sector investment and development, in particular as it concerns decentralized power or off-grid power in underserved and unserved communities. So for example, we have the mini-grid regulation, we have the captive power regulation, eligible customer regulation, the independent electricity distribution network regulation, amongst other regulations that allows for private sector to essentially invest and develop within the Nigerian power sector. I think what the challenges as it concerns practical challenges facing the practical challenges with the implementation of these regulations really lies with trying to secure that trust and confidence on the part of the private sector in investing and developing. So for example, I used to head the Energizing Economies Initiative, which provides power solutions to economic clusters such as markets. So one of the projects under that program included the ReEnergy market in Abia State, where we built a gas-fired independent power plant. Now, having secured the necessary IDN license and generation license that allowed for this plant to generate and distribute power within this market. So that's also having, complied with all of the regulatory requirements. There was still a case where the distribution company decided to take the company behind the IPP and the distribution infrastructure to court. So you had that fear amongst the private sector that even if I do get these licenses, even if I do get these permits, what guarantees that my investments, my rights are actually going to be protected. So I think it's the challenge we have is in securing that confidence and that trust, by the private sector in believing that, our regulations and policies and so on are enforceable. So as I mentioned, this case is currently in court, and I'm hoping it would set that precedence and will subsequently, give that confidence to the private sector to get involved. Secondly, do I have time for a second response? Second answer?
Just 1 minute.
Okay, secondly, with regards to the challenges in implementing these regulations in the power sector, we have so many regulations. So you want to get into the power sector, you have to think about having to, develop your environmental and social impact assessment report, get it approved by the Ministry of Environment. You have to get your license, your permit from the regulator. You have to, if you want to, sell power to the grid, get your PPA from NBET to evacuate power, get approvals from TCN. With respect to the equipment, get the necessary approvals and certificates from NEMSA, from SON. Like, there's so many regulatory bodies and regulatory requirements. I think there's need for us to have a coordinated sort of framework. So when the international investor or developer wants to break into this Nigerian energy space, it just makes it a bit more simplistic and sort of straightforward. So I think that's one of the practical challenges we have with implementing these policies and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. Moving on to Dolapo, Anita made a comment around investor confidence, which is something I would want you to expatiate on. What do you think are the peculiar regulatory challenges for investors in the renewable energy space, and what do you think will be your suggested interventions in tackling some of these challenges?
Well, just a few things, and I think that my fellow panelists have touched on. Anita and Mr. Ibebuki have touched on some issues, but I will just be speaking broadly, just from the understanding of an investor who sits in an office in London or in South Africa or anywhere else in the world and is looking to come in and invest in renewables. I think one of the things that I would say from a broad regulatory perspective that is important is seeing a clear alignment in what government's intentions are from a policy perspective and it dovetailing into operational, aligning government's goals. Government has a lot of policies, and I think it's been rightly said that we have no scarcity in terms of regulation and policy, particularly to do with renewables. We have a plethora of policy, which is supposed to show government intention, but is not enforceable law. But then when we then come to enforcing, and I'll just use practical examples. For example, and this cuts across, is broad, for everyone across the value chain, or everyone across the different segments for renewables, whether you're importing a stove, whether you're importing panels, is custom duties, for example. Whilst the policies say that you are supposed to be exempt from custom duty, your goods get to the port and then they tell you that you have to pay 5%. And this is an ongoing conversation that has been going on in the renewable energy sector for a while. Government has an intention. Federal Ministry of Finance has its own intention. Customs, when you get to customs, they tell you another thing. There is no consistency. So someone who wants to do a project in Nigeria is wondering what this is. I'll give you another example. Another example is about VAT, something that happened very recently. So the Federal Ministry of Finance released a VAT modification order, which is supposed to be good and supposed to help to, develop the sector. And it was covering a number of sectors, including the renewable energy sector. And it says for certain kinds of renewable energy equipment, no VAT. And then the FIRS subsequently comes up with its own statement to say, no, it's not true. And by law, that's legally invalid, because the person who enacts laws or comes out with orders is the Federal Minister of Finance. So those kinds of inconsistencies are, I mean, us as Nigerians is confusing to us. Then when you then talk about someone who's sitting in another country, you know, there's no alignment there. And it causes a lot of confusion for the investors and for people like us who have to be the middlemen between the investor and the person at customs or whoever, or the regulator. It's also very concerning for us because it's difficult. You tell your client something today, tomorrow you have to update them that something else is happening. But talking again about alignment, you know, for us to make this work and to renewables, the renewable sector is growing in Nigeria, and that's because it has varied ways that you can play in the sector. You can play in the sector in different segments, whether it's stoves, whether it's mini grids, whether it's C&I. There are so many segments to play in. But we all do business in states. So another part of alignment is states where we all do business, having an alignment with, well, let's say, starting with aligning with federal goals, but making it possible for people who do business in these states to be able to do business. One of the key areas that I think states can participate is land acquisition. Land acquisition for renewables, the cost will be particularly high because for projects like solar and wind, you need a lot of land. You know, so there needs to be alignment across our different agencies. There needs to be alignment across our federal and state dichotomies. I don't know if I can go on, but I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dolapo. Unfortunately, we are so much pressed for time. And what I would do at this point is just get parting words from each of the panelists so that I can hand over to Stephanie. So I would start with Anita. Anita, what are your parting words?
Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to promote the program that I work on, the Nigeria Electrification Project. It is open to private sector who are interested in developing mini grids, deploying solar home systems, or our basic EPC contractors who want to build power plants for federal universities and teaching hospitals. We have a total of $550 million US. We're providing grant funding in terms of subsidies. So if you're interested, reach out to the Rural Electrification Agency, ask about the Nigeria Electrification Project. You could also go to our website. We are open. We need to achieve this universal access to electrification, and we could only do this by supplementing the grid with off-grid renewable energy projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anita. And I would come back to Dolapo. Dolapo, please, can you please give us your parting words?
It's hard to say what parting words are, but I think there are just a few things that we need to constantly put our minds to if we're going to scale up with renewables and scale up the sector. And just to summarize what we've heard today, certainty of the regulatory framework and enforcement is very key. Tariff framework is very key, particularly when you are looking at the on-grid space. It's really very key. It's either that you have a tariff framework that is viable and works, or you have one where you have less regulatory intervention, and is market driven, depending on what sector you are playing, what segment you are playing. I think the issue of licensing and permitting has been talked about as well. It's very scary for investors. Most of them want to stay under the radar of permitting and licensing because luckily our laws allows you below 1 megawatts in a number of areas not to get licensing or get permits. So they keep staying comfortable in that area because when you get into the world of permits, there's just so much, like Anita talked about. I mean, if Anita, who is in REA, can be speaking about this, then what would other investors be saying? So that is very important. And just, creating the enabling environment. What is important, what is very interesting for renewables for me is the fact that is the intertwining with technology. And it's capable of evolving into different models. Our regulation needs to be reactive and responsive to different models and not stifle it. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Dolapo. Uzim, do you have any words for us?
Thank you very much, everyone. Just listening to what Anita, Donald, and Dolapo obviously the intention to push renewable forward is there. It's just to get a realignment of the different agencies. And Dolapo, to the point you made, especially about the customs and the different reaction, the treatment you get when you're actually at the ports. It will be very interesting and helpful if the federal government can also deliberately get the different agencies to collaborate and align on these intentions and break the wheel to make renewable blossom in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ozim. I say thank you very much again to all panelists. In terms of harmonizing views, obviously there are great opportunities within the renewable energy space. Are we moving, at least for Nigeria, gradually? Do we have a lot to do? Yes. Do we have policy inconsistency? Obviously. Is there a lot of work on both the regulator and the regulated side? Yes. The regulator, especially government, needs to ensure that there's certainty within the climb in order to bolster investment within the space. One of the things I also say is that investors sometimes also need to challenge government from time to time, because I guess in terms of the alignment, where each person sits, the prism through which you look at issues are different. Thank you very much again, and I'll hand over to Stephanie.
Lots of valuable information, information that we all keep asking, why is it not possible? And I think some of these are a lot of food for thoughts, which are also maybe things we can engage on after the summit, and hopefully that there'll be more questions popping up around what has just been discussed. I would like to thank the moderator for moderating so beautifully and for all the contributions from everyone.